Hello, hello. I'm here, right here. I just need to hit a button. I need to hit a button. Haha, I found the button. Hi, Nicholas. How are you?
I'm great. Long time no see, right?
I just saw you like a week ago.
I know, but don't you miss talking rocks already?
I do. We had such a great time. You were like one of my favorite people to end up at a conference with. So yeah, so for people who don't know, we were just in Dallas, Texas for the International Divination event, aka Tide. And we had a fantastic time. We both were talking about crystals and stones and minerals. And so, what did you teach?
I taught a crystal basics class aimed towards the kind of psychic and intuitive parts of ourselves. We got to meet a host of rocks and minerals that really kind of support that work, generally speaking, plus hit some of the fundamentals.
Mm-hmm.
And how about you? You were a really fun presenter to get to see in action. It's the first time I've actually gotten to do that.
That was the first time I've gotten to teach in like years, like really like get into. I mean, sacred space aside, this was the first time I've keynoted in a long time. It feels like. So yeah, so I did a keynote on. It was actually we changed it a little bit, and I think it was because you were on the list, which was good. So it ended up being originally we were just going to talk about divination with stones. And then it turned into divination with stones and plants, which I was like, woohoo, let's go for it. So I introduced a brand new divination system that I created there, which went over really well. People really liked that. That was super fun. You can read all about it in Horticulture, which comes out in the springtime. I got to do the kind of the world premiere of that there. And then before that, I did a mediumship workshop kind of on the fly, which was really super fun because I don't get to talk about that stuff as much anymore these days. It's really weird. My career has somehow gone from me being a professional medium and writing about like really deep stuff to like plants and crystals and I just find that completely entertaining because that was not the plan, we'll say. But here we are. And so, but it's okay. And one of the things that I kept saying over the weekend was like talking about plants and crystals has been good for me in the sense that it's lightened my energy up and it's lightened my work up a lot. And so, when you're all underworld all the time, um, you just your vibe gets heavy. Stuff gets a little. I won't say dark, but it's dark. Things get dark. And crystals and plants help alleviate a lot of the side effects of that. So, getting to talk about it was awesome. And getting to talk about both sides of that was really fun. And getting to meet some of the coolest people in divination. I mean, come on. Mary Greer, first of all, started the weekend off. You were there. So she started the weekend off doing a keynote on tarot and BTS, as in the K-pop group BTS. And that was the entire keynote. And I was in tears. First of all, I like K-pop. Are you a K-pop person? I mean, I knowing the music you listen to, I would imagine you're like, it's
It,
not really your thing, but
it's not my thing. I have enough friends who enjoy it, though, that I can find something to appreciate in it. Musical background, I'll find something to appreciate in any music.
mhm.
But what a great exposition she gave on that!
Yeah.
Like, I got
Whoa.
excited, and I'm not a tarot person or a K-pop person, and I loved seeing the dots she connected
Yeah.
and finding the archetypal imagery of the tarot in their work was super fun.
Yeah. That was amazing actually. And it was stuff that I hadn't thought about, but if you are a BTS fan, then first of all, K-pop, what I like about K-pop in general is, I mean, there's a lot of control over the final product. It's getting better these days, but what I like about K-pop is that it's most of the music is really positive. Like it's about like the stuff tends to be about like empowering yourself, getting over trauma or healing trauma, finding hope in your life. Like it's positive oriented music, and it's like the message is more like the messages tend to be more self-helpy, whereas music here in the States is like sex, drugs and sex, drugs, drugs and sex, murder, drugs. And it's just, you know, and I get it, and that's fine. And, you know, I was all into it back in the, but as I've gotten older, I've really have started to just appreciate music where there's like a message there, there's something behind it. And it's the same, you know, I don't know, I have the weirdest taste in music in the world, period. Like from where anybody I know, like it's K-pop, and then I'm listening to like really heavy rock, and then I go into classical because I get into a mood, and you know, so I'm all over the place with what I listen to on a day-to-day basis. But K-pop has been kind of a thing that I fell in love with over the pandemic, like hella fell in love with it. And BTS is a group that's iconic within K-pop, and so to correlate some of the stuff that goes on in their music and videos and things like that, and to see like, oh, this is the thing behind it, and they're working towards this, a lot of the similar things that we're working towards in you know, mysticism. I really just loved it. I was into it. So she starts talking about the magic shop, which is, it's a big deal in the BTS world. It's kind of the concept of like, this is the place you go to heal yourself, to empower yourself. And she starts talking about it, and I'm just like, I have to excuse myself, please. Like I had to get up and I had to leave, and I was like, I am turning into a man baby in front of like 100 strangers. Stop it right now. And so I had to leave and then come back, but it was really good. Like I was surprised. So, and then I ended up talking about Lenormand and Tessiomancy in my keynote, and Mary Greer is like in the front row, and I'm like, oh my Jesus God, I am teaching Mary Greer, which isn't true because she knows everything, but it was like that whole thing of like, I'm in the position of I'm teaching Mary Greer about Lenormand. Are you serious? Like, you know, like come on. So it was just a whole moment for me, but I really had a great time. And of course, Michelle and Roger, who put on the event, they also do Newts, which is the Northwest Tarot Symposium, and I believe Reader Studio now. Like they're running all of the big divination events in the country now. And they're just really good people. So I had just fantastic time, and I could hang out with you, which was super cool. Like we hung out a lot. Like we were best buddies. Was the three of us, me, you, and Matt. We're just all over the place, which was
I know.
awesome.
I was waiting for you guys to like kick me out and be like, okay, this Florida
No,
guy keeps following us around.
Florida man. Florida man. News at 11. Florida man. No, it was good. It was really good to hang out. It was good to talk crystals. There's also, there are few people who can like correct me on things and I don't get offended. Like, excuse you. And you are one of those people who are like, no, actually, please, Nicholas, if I'm pronouncing something wrong, please do. I had a rural Ohio public school education. You had a much better education than I did. And so we're just going to leave it at that. So anytime you need to correct me, please just do it. Like that's totally fine. But I was glad that you were there because I had a keynote and I almost mispronounced endogenous.
And you know what? Everybody would have rolled with the punches, and I doubt anyone would have noticed.
Oh, but you would have. And then you would have had that in your head of like, he mispronounces 2/3 of the words that he speaks. And again, what do I know? I'm from Brown County, Ohio. Like I'm just gonna leave it at that. But so I was glad you were there. It definitely was great because well, we got to hang out, and you did help me with my presentation a little bit, which was great because you helped me with some of my pronunciation and stuff. And then most importantly, we got to talk about the things that we love to create. Like we had a lot of really good creative discussions, and that's something that is really hard to do if you're, because you have to get the right people. You got to get the right people who understand the creative process, who want to be part of the creative process, who go through a creative process, so that when you're talking about your creative process, you've got somebody who understands where you're coming from. And it was so fun to have you there to talk about all of the fun crystal stuff that's going on. And I'm really excited about the books that you've got and the things that you're working on. I know we can't talk about them, but you're doing a lot of really amazing stuff. So I am, yes. Oh, I'm so excited. So excited. So freaking excited. Speaking of things that I'm excited about, we are going to be doing the Crystal Magic Intensive again. And we're looking at August, I think, is what we're looking at. So everyone, make sure that you are staying tuned for that. If you haven't already, join the Modern Witch email newsletter and you will get information about that. Join Nicholas's newsletter. You'll get information about that when it comes out. But we are working away, and we've decided on a focus where we're gonna put more energy. We're gonna still be doing the awesome stuff that we're doing, but we're gonna expand with each time we go to do a cycle of the class. We're gonna be expanding the material. So if people took the class the first time around, they get to come back for a little tiny fee, which really just helps with processing and stuff, and then they can get all the material all over again, and plus the additional stuff. So that's really cool. So I'm very excited about that, and I can tell you we're gonna get into divination. So that doesn't need to be a secret. Mercury has directed itself, and we ended up talking so much about divination while we were at the International Divination event, that it just seemed like perfect timing and perfect alignment with things. So I'm really excited about putting that together and organizing that, because that was really fun, and I like teaching with another person. It's like always a different experience when you get to teach with somebody else, so it's very fun. What are you in particular excited about? Any aspect of the intensive coming up and the new edition of the material?
I'm excited to take some stuff. I was talking with you about how I have this material, we're going to say, that I haven't done anything with except,
Mm-hmm.
a workshop here or there that is just kind of sitting around collecting virtual dust. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that there'll be a home for that. But I'm also glad that by collaborating, it's going to grow. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say anything more about how it's going to grow. But
Very
yeah,
excited.
everyone should just stay tuned. Even if you don't join
Yeah.
us for the intensive, please do. But if you don't, there's more opportunities to see this coming in the future, I think is a safe thing to say.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So we definitely have things working, and there's a lot going on, folks, but it's all good and it's all fun. And I'm excited. Again, excited. I think that's just the word du jour right now, is I'm excited about a lot of things. Which is cool, because coming out of the pandemic, I wasn't excited about anything. I was so not in the mood to start traveling again at the beginning of the spring. Oh my goodness, Nicholas. I had such a hard time. Poor Matt had to deal with me just being a bitch constantly. Like, I was this, I don't want to do it. I don't want to go. I just want to stay at home. I want to write. I want to. And he's like, "Oh, come on. You're going to have a good time. You know that you're going to meet people, and you're going to, do the things that you got to used to do, and you're going to enjoy." And so when we got to the Sacred Space Conference, that was when it clicked. I was like, I need to just shut the fuck up, be present, have a good time, see where this goes. You know what I mean? And I had a fabulous time. And so going into Tide, I was like, well, two things. First of all, no one wants a grumpy keynote speaker. That's not fun, right? And then the other thing was going in and realizing that I'm going to have, like, you were going to be there. I knew I was going to meet some old friends. I was going to make some new friends. I was going to finally get to be able to make some of the contacts. So I was like, you know what? Go and have a good time. And it wasn't hard to have a good time. And it wasn't hard to make connections and things like that. So all in all, I'm back on the travel train now. Now it's like, okay, we just booked tickets to go back home so that Matt can meet my mother. That's going to be a thing.
It'll be
What crystal should we be bringing for that, Nicholas?
Rhodonite, actually.
Rhodonite. Exactly. Yes. I love
That
it.
wasn't planned, but yes,
But
Rhodonite's my
yes,
number
that's
one
it.
choice for that.
Yeah. And so yeah, so we've got a lot of I'm back on the board. I'm excited about traveling again and doing all the things. So yay raw to that. What is coming up on, because you're traveling so much this year. Like, when we were talking about it, my brain was like exploding. So what's next for you, because in the next couple of months, because you've got a lot going on, and we should talk about that.
Yeah, and this is after already having done so much travel this year so far. So my next public event, we're gonna say, is here in Orlando at the Summer Magic Fest in June. The day after that, I fly out to Denver for the International New Age Trade Show. I'm going to be doing some book signings there with the new book, Crystal Basics Pocket Encyclopedia, teaching a class on how to spot crystal fakes. And I hear word that I might even be presenting some awards at the awards banquet for the Coalition of Visionary Resources Visionary Awards, which we have both won in the crystal category, which is super fun. So they'll announce the winners formally in the ranking at that event. And then I'll be at Mystic South in July, which is an event in Atlanta, Georgia. I'll be at Temple Fest, which is in a new location in Massachusetts this year. And I feel like I'm forgetting something, but that's the majority of it. I'm going to hit a couple of my regular venues for Reiki training and some other things. Still keeping up the online classes. Got a handful coming up over the next few weeks that I'm really excited about. So, yeah, it's going to be a really busy summer.
which is really exciting, like super exciting. I am not going to be that busy. Well, I'm going to be busy, but I'm not going to be traveling busy because I can't believe I did this, Nicholas. I took a job. It's not really a job. Like I say, it's not really a job. I have come out of retirement, I should say, because back in the day, before I became a witchcraft author, I was a dancer and a choreographer, and I am lucky to be in a position where I live close to a program that was like, hey, we're looking for somebody, and I was like, oh, how fun would it be? And my big complaint has been, like, writing books, all I do is sit down all the time, and I'm in front of a computer, right? And I love writing. That was my wake word for my Alexa. And I love writing and things, but being in front of my Mac is just like 24 hours a day, basically, is not good for the body. And I've realized, like, oh, I've gained like 40 pounds, and I'm very out of shape. And coming from a dancer's body to like this is really uncomfortable, right? So I'm like, okay, this will get my butt back in gear. This will help me get back into the swing of things. So I'm doing it purely really because I want to be creative again in that way, and I need some non-book creative time. And so when I moved to California, I couldn't find a gig anywhere, so I just kind of gave up on it, and I needed to because I couldn't have written like the books and stuff. Like, there's no way, um, because I get into it. And so yeah, so I'm back. It's like been 13 years since I've done this, like, for professionally, and so we're gonna see how it goes. But that's my summer. Like, I blocked it out. There's no gigs. I have like one more gig coming up well, there's a gig in July, but that's it. So I'm not doing a whole bunch of much of anything. I'm staying home, working on books, and being a choreographer again. We're gonna see how that goes.
Which
A
is
little
super
nervous.
cool.
Yeah,
It's going to be great for you.
I think it will too. And everybody who knows me, like, and who has known me for a long period of time, like, that was my identity, was like dancer boy. And then, that quit when I moved out here. And so everybody who knows me is like, oh, this is going to be great for you. And you've really yes, I need to get out of my house. I need to go work. I love my plants, but I have a lot of them, and sometimes I'm sick of staring at them. I'd rather go do something else. Anyway, we are here to talk about rhodonite, because that is the stone of the day. So we should probably get to the stone of the day. There are people watching us right now, like, are they going to shut the heck up and start talking about the first rhodonite? One of my favorite stones ever, rhodonite. For many reasons, rhodonite is one of my favorite stones. It is so solid. So when we think about, I'm just going to give you my gnosis, and then I want to hear your gnosis, and then let's just go on a gnosis experience. Then we can talk about the nitty gritty stuff. But for me, I love rhodonite because it is stable. It's like, out of all the stones that work with emotion and who can help with processing like the heavy stuff, I feel like rhodonite provides stability while that's happening. It grounds you while you're processing things in a way that I haven't felt from other stones when I go to engage it. And so usually I have to, like, work with a couple of different partner stones in order to get a similar vibration, a similar thing going on with what I get out of rhodonite. But there's something about rhodonite that, especially being a queer person, being a person who really struggled with identity politics, like internally, and things like that, rhodonite was one of the best um, stones to partner with at a young age. And so when people come to me and they're like, oh, my teenager's having a really hard time just with being a teenager, and what do you do? Rhodonite, friend. Give them Rhodonite. It will really help, not just with the hormonals. I mean, that's a whole other thing, but it's the what the hormonal stuff does to the brain, right? My mom used to call it a brain disease. Oh, you got the teenage brain disease. And she's like, you just become a dumb person until you hit like 20 something, and then you wake up and you realize like, oh, there's common sense. But so it was like her joke, but there's something to it. So Rhodonite is this really wonderful stone for helping us move through things in a balanced way, in a way that brings grounding and stability to the actions. There's stones that help us reveal our emotions and help us process our emotions, but they don't necessarily help you put everything into place while you're doing that. And Rhodonite's really good for that. So for me, that's my primary go-to, I think, for the heavy emotional stuff for people. I'm like, here, you need some Rhodonite, girl. Or you said a bad breakup, you need some Rhodonite, girl. And so, okay, so that's my Rhodonite spiel. What about you, Nicholas?
Well, I don't think I knew that you loved Rhodonite, because it is easily one of my favorite stones to work with as well. One that I have with me almost on a daily basis. It's hiding under my shirt today. And I kind of grew to love it by accident. I finally like met Rhodonite face to face when I needed some additional support for anxiety and stress, and I was working a really fast-paced job in like the corporate retail kind of world, leading a team of a multi-million-dollar business. It was stressful, and I'm already kind of tightly wound. So I needed something that was going to help me keep my feet on the ground and remind me to breathe and kind of lean into the discomfort. And Rhodonite became that ally. And I can remember the moment. There is an exact moment where I realized, like, Rhodonite works hard. Rhodonite shows up for you. It doesn't matter who you are. And it was the night I was in a motorcycle accident. So this probably comes as a surprise to people who may not know me super well, but I used to ride a motorcycle full time, only mode of transportation, and that ended suddenly the way it often ends suddenly. And finally, it was time to get my X-rays, and I was wearing two necklaces, Rhodonite and amethyst. When I had to take them off to have my images taken, all of a sudden, this like wave of anxiety hit me. It was like that was the moment the shock wore off and the gravity of the situation was there. It all seemed very manageable. There was like a comfortable bit of emotional distance between me and the events, so that way I had the intellectual capacity to process them. But once the Rhodonite came off, it was like almost pure panic, and that's really profound for me. And the moment they got handed back to me, and once the nurse put them back in my hands, like, I breathed a sigh of relief. I'm like, oh, there really is something to this. It's not all in my head, I don't think, because I hadn't even made the connection that I was handling this so well. But everyone told me that I was handling it pretty darn well in spite of getting hit by a car. So, I mean, all is well in my life now. But Rhodonite has come to symbolize for me the emotional anchor in times of change or chaos. And I see how exquisitely it shows up for that when we kind of decode its doctrine of signatures by looking at more than just its color, but by looking at things like its formula and formation process and all that fun stuff. It's all kind of hidden in there. And if you think our viewers would like it, I'd love to kind of walk us through that.
Yes, I think our viewers would love it. I want to just add real quick. I didn't. I mean, I know that you had a thing for Rhodonite because when we were at the conference, you had mentioned like not having the thing that you wanted, the Rhodonite piece you wanted. Um, but I didn't realize you had that kind of connection to it, and so I love it so much. Like, it's actually, we have a healing altar that's just for this, for like emotional stuff. And it's, if you look at Crystal Magic for the Modern Witch, you open it up, there's this big pink page in the beginning, and then there's this piece of Rhodonite, and that's my big beautiful slab that I have. It's this big baby. And I call it a she, but it's not. We blah blah blah. That's my own personal blah 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 stuff. But she's really a powerful piece in the house, and it's an unsuspecting stone. It's one of those stones that if you see from a distance, you don't necessarily get the immediate like vibe, but you pick it up and then it's something starts happening. It gets really intense. And so, do you find that, like, so we're talking about emotional anchoring and stability and things like that. when do you find is the best time to approach the stone to do what you're about to talk about? When are the best times to approach the stone to do that work before we jump into the exercise?
Honestly, I think rhodonite is one of those stones that if you are like me and tend toward the anxious disposition, whether you've got a diagnosis, a clinical one like I do, or not, I think it's a really good proactive measure, because there are a few kind of analogies that I often use to describe the mechanism of what it's like working with this stone. And one of them could be, imagine that you're in a little teeny boat, and the current of emotion is coming out, and you have no idea where it's going to take you, and you just feel like you're going to be totally subject to it. Rhodonite becomes this anchor, so you don't get swept up in that surge of emotions, but you can see it, you can see where it's going, you can process it, you can take time with it without losing yourself, your identity, your progress in that. And another way to kind of describe how it works with overwhelm is, think of like someone's just giving you 25 balloons that you've got to hold, and it's a lot to juggle. And that if just one of them gets away, that gap that it makes, if they're all helium filled, they're all gonna go. So rhodonite doesn't make the emotions go away if those balloons symbolize our emotions, but what it does is it ties a little weight to each one. So if you drop it, it's just right there. It's a stable foundation. It allows you to kind of manage things in the moment. So for people who have that, maybe anxious, panicky, overthinky kind of disposition, I think rhodonite is wonderful because it allows us to have a sense of emotional security. So whatever we experience doesn't go away, but we have the wherewithal to be present with it all the more. So for me, it's an everyday ally. And there are days that I take off. Like I didn't take any at all to Dallas, which is really unusual for me. I always travel with rhodonite, but I just didn't take one on that particular event, and that was a whole exercise for me because sometimes we got to learn to do it alone. And of course, I had other crystal allies. I'm not going to teach a class on crystals and not have them with me. But certainly we can turn to it in the urgent or emergent kind of situations as well. For those of us who might not be so tightly wound, it could be good when we're having that feeling of stress, that trigger of trauma, that thing that's coming up in the moment, rather than using it proactively. But I think anytime that we're processing old stuff, it's really useful because it helps us have this even keel as we process it. So personally, I think everybody should have rhodonite. It's rare for me to make a pronouncement like that because I'm big on people have agency. We all have different issues. We have different baggage. We have different trauma. We have different outlooks and biases. We're therefore going to be attracted to and require different kinds of allies on our healing process. But I think the common experience we all have of being human and being alive today, we could all benefit from some rhodonite in our lives, whether that's a little bit or some everyday, like I prefer.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I was just going through all the places in my house where I have it stashed. It's under my bed, like it's technically in between my box spring and my mattress. Um, because I was having fitful sleeps and things like that, and it helps out with that. I've got two pieces in my office, one under my desk, one under my chair, where I do my trance work and my self hypnosis. And then I've got a piece that was in my car, that was really, really good because so driving in a car, lots going on. Sometimes people are talking at you. There's, sometimes there's chaos. Sometimes you're in traffic and some will cut you off and you're just, and I am Godzilla. I like turn into like kaiju with road rage very easily. So I've learned a long time ago, put a little piece of rhodonite underneath your seat in the car and it'll help keep your ass calm so that you don't turn into a kaiju and destroy people in traffic. And so that's been helpful. So it's one of the stones that I just think it's so underplayed. I think it is so um just overlooked, and it's just because it's not sparkly, it's not a crystal in the way that we think of crystals and the way light's not coming through it and doing all this crazy stuff. So it's different for people, and I think that people are like, yeah, It's not the glamorous stone, but there are some really glamorous pieces. Anyway, I'm going to shut up because you had a thing you wanted to share with us, and I'm very excited about that. But I'm so glad that I'm glad that Rhodonite became our stone today. I'm bonding with you over Rhodonite, Chris. It's one of those things. I have to say we have some fun people real quick before we move on. I want to say hi to Sarah Elizabeth. Thank you for coming. I want to say hello to Chris Honorio. I spent the weekend with him, and I still can't pronounce his name. Oh, there you go. See, when you say it, it sounds sexy. When I say it, it sounds like I'm from the Midwest. Say hello to Jessica Shoemaker. Thanks for coming. We've got hi Christine Ashworth. We love you. We got to spend the weekend with Christine as well. She was amazing. And then Kev is an Uber follower fan of mine. I'm sure he's on your timeline and stuff too. He's just an amazing guy. So hi Kev, thanks for coming and joining us. Back to what we were talking about, Mr. Pearson. So this exercise, this thing that you do, where did this come from? Is it something that you learned or something that you developed? And then why don't you go ahead and show us, and I'll shut the heck up.
A little bit of both. So this kind of decoding process is what I call it. It looks at the geology of a rock or mineral as its own kind of doctrine of signatures. And I know this is something we touched on a bit in our Crystal Magic Intensive last year. And of course, we'll repeat bits of that. But it started out of observation. So when I worked in a museum, for those of you who may not know, I worked in an earth science museum when I attended university. And although I didn't go to school to study mineral science, I ended up changing my focus quite a bit to put more emphasis on it. And I noticed that I felt a certain way holding minerals rich in iron, and that, lithium had a particular effect on my emotional body, or that beryllium was really expansive to my mind. And I often didn't know this until I sat with a crystal and then looked up its geology. But then I also started to see the trends by looking at crystal literature. People who may not have known what the constituents of a rock or mineral were had surprisingly similar things to say about them. Or writing about two different iron minerals, you see some similar verbiage from people who, again, weren't sharing their notes. So I kind of developed a few cursory ideas from that. And then I was introduced to the work of the late Michael Ginger. He was a German pioneer in the world of lithotherapy or crystal healing, and was first and foremost a geologist. Before he ever went into the therapeutic route, he was there to study the science of rocks, and he started to notice trends first with people's personalities and the kinds of crystals they're drawn to based on their crystal system. And he developed his own kind of method, and I found other people who did similar things. So I took all of that and kind of aggregated it with my own experience, my own observations, looking for trends among all the literature, and kind of pulled together my own system of decoding crystals. So I spell that out in Crystal Basics. So if you have a copy of the big Crystal Basics in particular, it goes through formation process, crystal system, chemical composition, hardness, diaphanity, all the rest to kind of give you an overview. But you can go as deep or as light as you like. And it's often a really good way to take your understanding of what a crystal does to a different level. Usually the definitions we read in crystal books are like the surface level effect. When we start to decode the geology of it, then we begin to look at things from the causal level. We see, oh, this is why it has that kind of effect. This is why it starts to feel like another crystal that I know. So when we start to look through a geologist's eyes at crystals, we see a whole new set of patterns. So that's the kind of approach that I take when doing this. So, of course, this is something I've done with Rhodonite several times over. And it turns out in the years between the two Crystal Basics, the big one and the Pocket Encyclopedia, science has actually redefined the chemical composition of Rhodonite. So this will be my first time kind of like publicly decoding it with the revised chemical formula. So we're going to see how much of that I remember. But the short version is that it is a silicate of manganese. What they've redefined is like which kind, like which valence, what the ionic charge of those manganese constituents are. And it has been formally decided by the International Mineralogical Association that there's also essential calcium in its crystal structure. Instead of it just being a prominent extra ingredient that you found in most rhodonite, they've decided it occurs so frequently that they've reclassified it as a silicate of manganese with calcium. And that actually makes a lot of sense to me energetically. And let's talk about why. So, first and foremost, if we look at manganese minerals, they tend to be very heart-centered. We could think of stuff like rhodochrosite as a great example, or maybe morganite, which has small amounts of manganese to turn it pink. Minerals like this really tend to open up our heart center. They mediate between the extremes of being closed off and being open. They allow us to understand that vulnerability is a form of strength. And that's part of what makes rhodonite so comforting. Silicate minerals have this expansive quality. They kind of expand our view, our perspective, our spiritual connection to things. So it's almost like widening our capacity to process things at the emotional level. And when we add that tiny, tiny amount of essential calcium, then we also see a stronger stabilizing force. And that's one of the things that I think really separates rhodonite as a manganese silicate from rhodochrosite, which is manganese carbonate. It's more than just the carbonate versus silicate base. It's that tiny bit of calcium that makes this so much more grounding. It feels so much more resilient. Calcium, of course, we find in our teeth and bones. It relates to structure. It is a Saturnian kind of metal and helps us put boundaries and limits on things. So we know when enough is enough, or when we got to take a step back. So it's interesting that we have this interplay between opening the heart and having the opportunity. There's just a tiny little caveat on there that says, be open until you reach this threshold. And then, take time for you, put that boundary up, practice self-care. So this could be a gem with its manganese content that we see associated with things like fear and irritability, maybe shyness. It can help us cultivate meaningful connection from the heart space. If we look at its crystal system, it belongs to the Triclinic crystal system. So, the root word of that means inclined in three directions. So we have three axes. If we can draw three imaginary lines through a crystal form. Here's some kind of blocky, incomplete crystals of rhodonite from Franklin, New Jersey. And the crystal forms of these are much less symmetrical than we see in a lot of other crystal classes, because this group has three angles that all have to be different lengths, and none of them are allowed to meet at right angles. So they're all three inclined is what that means. So there are fewer points of symmetry than we'd find in a hexagonal crystal, a trigonal crystal, a cubic or isometric crystal. So what triclinic minerals do is they're the masters of reinvention. They help us accept perfection just as things are. It says, sometimes what looks like it's imperfect or asymmetrical on the surface actually has a hidden order, a hidden crystallinity to it. So they help us integrate what is, help us take where we are and where we're headed and let them flow seamlessly, even when it doesn't feel perfect. So rhodonite becomes this emotional comforter that allows us to kind of lean into the discomfort of life, and recognize that there's nothing wrong with us and that the emotions we experience aren't good or bad. They just are. So there's nothing wrong with you if you feel anxious or irritable or fearful or have grief. That's just part of the human condition, and it's part of what makes life beautiful. And then we can also take a look at the formation process. Just about all rhodonite on Earth is made via processes of metamorphism, wherein we take some other kind of rock or mixture of rocks and either squeeze them or heat them. And the addition of that extra energy into the equation will liquefy some things and smash some other bits together, and will create new minerals out of that. So in this particular case, metamorphic rocks and minerals like rhodonite help encourage all processes of change and transformation. They give us stamina and dedication to see things through to the end. So when we feel a little emotionally depleted or overwhelmed, rhodonite helps us kind of stay the course and not feel quite so worn thin, we'll say. Interestingly enough, Michael Ginger, in one of his books, talks about how the formation process of rhodonite, like if we could see it sped up in real time, which of course we can't, it kind of resembles the process of like forming scar tissue or scabs on open wounds, the way it happens at the surface level of the Earth's crust out of extant materials and kind of fills over the top of manganese deposits and keeps the oxides and the less stable things from being exposed to the elements. And so he always suggested it for like speeding up the healing of wounds. I would say that is probably more metaphorical in terms of our emotional wounds rather than our physical ones. But when we start to look at all of those different layers and levels of symbolism, it absolutely makes sense. This is something that we would turn to when we feel the need for that emotional support. So it's just a fun exercise I love to do. We could go even deeper into it with like hardness and diaphaneity and other optical properties, but I think that's probably already a boatload of information, a rock load of information even.
Yeah, I would. That's a lot. It's good. It's useful, but it's a lot. Yeah. And that's one of the best things about hanging out with you is going on like these really deep dives. Because there's certain things that people just aren't going to appreciate as much. And yeah, there's a lot there when it comes to this whole classification. Like the whole family of stones is like that though. Like there was a lot of hidden interesting things that I know when I started like really scratching at it, I was like, oh no, this is a whole, like this will require me to learn new science and new things that I don't have time for. But it was, yeah, there's a lot going on with this family. Are there relatives to this stone that are as equally accessible in your opinion?
So there are a couple of like, we'll say, close relatives. For example, there's a zinc-rich version of rhodonite that we call fowlerite. It often forms in like yellowy or brownish colors. And oftentimes, if you see a really beautiful piece of rhodonite that's polished, some of the kind of yellowy or beigey streaks in it might be the zinc-rich fowlerite. They might also be iron-rich instead. So that would be probably the first thing that comes to mind. There are other minerals in this group that are like in geologically speaking, we arrange minerals by close composition and structure and things. So there is a rhodonite group. It only consists of 3 species though: rhodonite, ferrorhodonite, which means rhodonite wherein some of the manganese is replaced by iron, and vitinkeite, which is the hypothetical pure manganese version. So there's no calcium in it whatsoever, no other trace elements, and it's more hypothetical than actual. If you have a large enough sample of rhodonite, then there should be some molecules of vitinkeite in there. But there are 2 other minerals that I'd love to mention that are otherwise related. So one of them is nambulite, named for, I want to say, a Japanese mineralogist whose last name was Nambu. Or family name was Nambu since they put them first. And this is interesting because it contains both manganese and lithium. And it's hard to find on its own, but some of the really fine Australian rhodonites have high percentage of this in there. And they sometimes have just a touch of purple in their kind of red or pink color. And there is a softness, a sweetness, a zinginess at the same time that other rhodonites don't tend to have. And then there are the gemmy varieties of rhodonite. So I've got one here. So most of the time we find it really, really opaque. But if I backlight this, I know this is bad lighting on camera, but you can see that light does actually shine through it. So there's some debate over how much of these are actually pyroxmangite, which is a close relative with a different crystal system, different number of bases in its crystal system, we'll say. But these really gemmy ones you can find. They come from a handful of places, but the most accessible stuff comes from a mine called the Conselheiro mine in Minas Gerais, Brazil. It's also known from Australia and a few other places, but the crystal clarity of it, that deep ruby red color, brings so much fire into our emotional body to invite transformation. And if you've never been a rhodonite fan, if you know the more opaque masses like this, uh, here's a massive one that comes from this one is actually from Canada, from British Columbia, but you can find massive varieties from all over. If those don't do it for you, try tracking down one of the transparent pieces, one of those deep, almost like cherry red or hot pink ones that are just translucent to transparent around the edges. And you might find that this otherwise ordinary rock is transfigured into something luminous and like really, really high consciousness in terms of its um, we'll say level of activity.
Yeah, beautiful. I have like a couple of Jimmy pieces, but they're really not inexpensive to get. And I the only reason I even got them was because I was able to get them through a hookup via wholesale. Because and you only really see them in like jewelry and things like that. You don't really like that raw piece you had was gorgeous, by the way. You have the prettiest stones. You always have like one of everything in a thing, and I like that about you. Okay, so moral of the story with rhodonite is that it's a good stone to help with human stuff, like in general, like just the human stuff that we got to deal with, right? I mean,
Exactly. Like stuck in an airport and feel anxious, traffic on the highway making you a little irritable, uncertainty about big life things like introducing spouses to parents
yeah,
or starting a new career. One of my mentors in the world of crystal healing, who has since retired, Samaya K. Astor, better known as Naisha Azian, she discussed rhodonite as a stone of drawing out your latent skills and talents.
mhm,
Because what happens when there's less emotional noise clouding stuff up? Well, you suddenly have bandwidth to devote to other things.
yeah,
So rhodonite for me is a stone of new
yeah,
beginnings, and
I
it
like that.
helps. Yeah, it channels our stuff into what we're doing.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm here for that. Okay, we have now come to that time, Nicholas. It is now time to do the random crystal prescriptions for this episode. And I think we only have 8 today, and that's okay because some of these are weird. Are you ready? And everybody, we are going to we do this every episode, so if definitely comment below what you want me to ask Nicholas to prescribe a crystal for in the next episode, and we'll do it. So just comment below, and we will totally make that happen. So here we go. Are you ready? All right.
Yes.
So
Say rhodonite for everything.
I mean, actually, you might be able to. I mean, I advise you not to, but it's okay if you do, because yeah. Okay, so the first one is you are quitting cola, like you're giving up soda.
Amethyst.
Amethyst. I like that. Okay, that's fair. Taxes. You are trying to work out a situation with the IRS. What stone do you go to?
Fluorite.
Ooh, why?
It's a very logical kind of stone. It kind of just it lets us be just business, no feelings.
Okay, I like that. You're buying a car.
Oh, leopard skin jasper.
Oh, I like that answer. I really like that. Why would you say that though?
So for me, leopard skin jasper is the salesman's stone. So if you want to be a little immune to the charm of salespeople, but
Mhm.
also have the same charisma when you got to negotiate, leopard skin jasper.
Yeah, gotta have the risk. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Um, okay. When you want your partner to pick up all those hints you've been dropping.
Just buy whatever rock you wanted instead of dropping the hint. That's what this is about, right?
There you go. There you go.
Otherwise, aquamarine for some clarity.
Yeah, I was gonna say aquamarine morganite. That would be good. Okay, you're dieting, but only for your tummy because you want a fat ass.
Oh, let's go with carnelian.
Why?
It's energizing, it's optimistic, but it's also juicy.
Okay, okay. All right, I like that. I totally like that. I would have said citrine, but I feel like I say citrine for everything. Just like you say citrine for everything. I feel like citrine. Here you go.
Yeah.
Um, exercising. So like you're just starting to exercise. You have not been. You've been very stagnant. You're trying to get back into the swing of things.
So, I mean, I'd be tempted to say carnelian again because it is so good at getting out of a rut. Think of it as like overcoming inertia.
Hmm. Hmm. I like that. I would say black tourmaline or obsidian,
I could
because
see
it's
that
good for
too.
like breaking through stuff and root chakra e. Okay, so when you want to keep people away from you on the subway.
Any crystal, as long as you talk to it out loud and address it by name, that'll do the job, I think. Just sit there. You're not talking on your cell phone, you're
Yep.
talking to your emerald. Yeah.
You're talking to Herman the Emerald. Yeah, absolutely.
People will leave you
That
alone.
works on a plane. I just take out my witchcraft books and I sit it right there, and people are like, "Whoop," and they just go by. Okay, so you for people who want to ban books, what crystal would you prescribe them to help get over that?
Mm. How about some morganite? Because for me, it's a stone of compassion and equanimity.
That's such a high vibe answer. I like it.
It's
I
better
like
than
it.
the real answer, which is whatever rock is on the side of the road that you can
Right,
roll.
right, yeah. That's my low vibe answer that I would have given. Um, okay, and then that was it. That was the last one. So there we go. All right. So there actually are a couple questions, and we hadn't planned on answering questions, but things have come through, so I just thought maybe we could hit on them real quick. So Kevin was asking. I told him we should just do an episode on this stone, but let me pull it up here. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Columbianite, which is the aka the lightning stone. So he was asking, have you ever worked with it?
I have. So columbianite is a form of pseudotectite, which is actually obsidian.
Mhm.
Pseudotectite is just a kind of relic of a name that stuck around because they perplexed scientists for long enough, but they finally
Very
found,
perplexed. Yeah.
yeah, they finally found the clues that told them it had to be terrestrial origin. So yeah, I find them really good for solving mysteries, but like mystery with a capital M. And those aren't really things that you solve, but you experience. So bringing light to the hidden parts of our existence. But yeah, they're super fun. I do have Columbianite in the Pocket Encyclopedia, but any other pseudotectite like the Agni that's coming out of Indonesia, Saphrodite from
So
Arizona,
cool.
any of those would have similar properties.
Yeah, and that's so cool. And do you and Kevin is asking, how can we as individuals educate our community about these gorgeous stones when most default to wanting Moldavite, black obsidian, things like that. So, these stones that aren't the Instagrammable, easily popular kind of stones, how do we get people interested in those, do you think?
Mm. I have quite a number of thoughts on this. I know, like you and I have talked about the
Hmm.
Moldavite craze, particularly the wave of it in 2020 forward, and how maybe Moldavite wasn't the answer to the questions people were asking and the experiences they wanted to overcome.
Hmm.
So I think at the end of the day, the only thing we can do other than advocacy is demonstration by example. Like when people see that you're calm and collected and a crystal lover and they want to know what the crystal is that's doing that, the answer probably won't be Moldavite, at least not for everybody. It might be for some of us. I love it. I work with it. It's around my life quite often, but not as often as rhodonite, not as often
Hmm.
as good old fashioned clear quartz or emerald. So I think the thing to do is to just lean into the stones that we love, and hopefully our love becomes infectious and it
Hmm.
rubs off on others, if not through like advocacy and talking about it, then at least by the fact that it's obviously working for us. And the the measure of magical efficacy is the most important part. Like, does this tool work? Does it do the job we're aiming for? Then we should use it. And if it doesn't,
Right.
move on to the next tool.
Right, absolutely. Well, and I think too, like there's one of the things that bothers me about the kind of the crystal scene is that there's this emphasis on needing all the things. And so it and a lot of people who are turned off by crystals, it's that it's a commodity. You have to go buy this thing in order to have this experience. And for a lot of spiritual people, that's like oh, no, no, thank you. That's a major turnoff. And I completely get that. And I think that this kind of mentality furthers that and makes it even harder to deal with, because it isn't, everybody wants Moldavite and everybody wants Tanzanite and everybody wants the obsidian, and they want these things that are A, they can be really hard to find, B, they can be really, really expensive depending on what, and then C, there's a lot of scams out there. I'm glad you're doing the how to spot a fraud class. That stuff is really important. On so many levels, because again, we have to demystify crystals, and you have to demystify the mineral kingdom as much as we possibly can. And when it's this emphasis on getting the big, sparkly, expensive, pretty stuff all the time, you get this really warped sense of what crystal people are doing and what mineral people are doing. I even hate to say crystal people, because really it's like we're really mineral people getting into the wonderful things the earth is providing us, right? And learning to work with those. And so the commodity stuff, that tends to get my goat. It kind of, and then of course, like in all of the like Instagrammable, and we've all done it. I mean, there's no shame, but in the Instagrammable, like little one meme crystal posts that are like, Moldavite will do it'll resurrect unicorns, and it'll like, help you call forth dragons, and like all of this stuff. And then you get to like Rhodonite, and it's like love, compassion, so it's like just the way it's presented isn't a holistic kind of approach to it, I guess, is my thing. It's yeah, there's way cooler stones that people don't even know about, like I'm obsessed with wolfenite. I'm absolutely, it is a very cool stone. Nobody knows about it. Like I had to put it, when I put it in the book, people are like, really, wolfenite? I'm like, you don't want to do other stone? I'm like, no, wolfenite is amazing. Everybody, it's my stone. Nobody knows what wolfenite is. And so it's one of those things that it's just like, no, go outside of what you're used to. Go explore, go play. And I think that's the number one thing when it comes to just educating people and getting them into things, is helping them go play with them, because you don't know until you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know until you try. So
Exactly.
yeah, so there's that. Nicholas, can you remind everybody real quick, if they are interested in finding out more about you, where do you send them?
I mean, you can check out my website. It is not up to date on its calendar, but that's theluminouspearl.com. You can also find me on Instagram and other social media as @theluminouspearl. That's probably the best place, because the link in that bio gets updated a lot more frequently. And yeah, lots of stuff coming up real soon. How about you? Where should people find you, Devin?
Oh, modernwitch.com. Just go to modernwitch. Everything's on modernwitch.com. You can go there. You can find me. You can find what we're working on. It is also a little out of date. I'm working on that. It's websites are hard. But yeah, all the stuff's there. We try to put all the latest videos and whatever we're doing is on there. So yeah, check it out. And of course, make sure that you like and subscribe. Like and subscribe is super important for any online streaming stuff. And if you are subscribed, then you can definitely stay tuned about when we're going to do the Crystal Magic Intensive. We'll be dropping discounts for people who watch the show. We're going to do a whole lot. So make sure that you're subscribed, make sure that you like, and make sure that you share if you think anybody else in your life might enjoy talking about crystals and weird shit with Nicholas and Devin. So, all right, everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. We will see you in just a couple of weeks with another episode of Getting Stoned with Devin and Nicholas. Until then.